Mr. Mayor, next up on the agenda, we're going to move into a phase in which the comprehensive,
Do we get off the table, let them come up here, or what happens?
Yes, sir. So next up, the planning board will be joining the Board of Commissioners up here on the dais. What they will do, they will actually simply call themselves to order, and as soon as they gavel themselves in, then we'll move right into the comprehensive plan kickoff session. And if it's all right with you, Mr. Mayor, we'll invite the Planning and Zoning Board to the dais.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
There's a little step on the corner down there.
I think this is going to be the easiest planning board meeting we've ever run. So basically, all I have to do is call this meeting to order. And this is the special meeting of September 15th, 2021. And then I'm turning this over to Jen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up on the agenda, this is item 6. Item 6 is a comprehensive plan kickoff session. 6A will actually be a comprehensive plan presentation, and following that will be some questions and answers, or Q&A. Now, we've got a wonderful team with us from Stuart, Inc., and I will actually defer to our colleague to introduce the entire team. But we'll start out with Jay McLeod, who is over from Stuart, Inc., and is a member of the leadership team there. Jay, we'll go ahead and we'll bring you up either to the lectern or to the microphone.
How about the microphone so everybody can hear you?
Would you like to hand Mike?
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having us here tonight. It's great to be here, and really looking forward to working with the town on their comprehensive plan update. My name is Jay McLeod, and I'm with Stuart. As James indicated, that's a multidisciplinary firm based in Raleigh, but we also have offices in Charlotte, Columbia, and Wilmington, among other places. We primarily provide construction and planning-related services, and so that includes civil engineering, structural engineering, transportation engineering and planning. There's geotechnical construction testing services, surveying. There's our municipal planning group, and I have some team members here with me tonight. And in addition, we also have a kind of a niche group that does sports and events planning. So they help out with things like football tournaments and so forth. So that's kind of an introduction to Stuart in general, but we also, like I said, our municipal planning group was founded probably 2 or 3 years ago now. We deal primarily with small to mid-sized local governments across the state. We help them with land use planning, comprehensive plan updates, sometimes ordinance and unified development ordinance updates, which are land development regulations. We also do some local government training and education about the processes involved in land development regulation. So there are about 7 of us. I believe there's 6 or 7 of us, but we work closely sometimes with the landscape architecture group and the civil engineering group as needed to augment our capacity as well. That's Stuart, and if you'll switch to the next one, I'll introduce our municipal planning group. So with me tonight is Chad Sari, who's at the end of that row there. He's the practice area leader for our group. Chad has a couple decades of local government planning experience as well as some private sector experience. And so he brings kind of that perspective, as well as he's worn the hat of elected official. And so he also brings kind of an understanding of that side of the table to the plan development process. Andrea Radford is with me also. Andrea has a background in grant writing, historic preservation, and also GIS and GIS analysis. And so she does a lot of work with that. And she's also been involved in a couple CAMA land use plans with me in terms of comprehensive plan development. I have a background originally in ecology, but then moved into urban and regional planning. a lot of GIS work in my history, suitability analysis and so forth. I also have worked with regional planning councils in Florida on long-range regional plans. I have local government experience, so I've done things like Melissa does, processing development applications and rezoning, site plans, special use permits. I've even done some sign runs and sign permits and fence permits, so I kind of got to do it all. And then I got to move back to Stuart and do long-range planning, which is really where my heart is, and especially long-range plans for the coastal communities that deal with a range of issues that I find challenging and interesting to tackle. Up on the top left is Chiquesha Colon. She's joined us recently. She has a background in pedestrian and transportation planning, as well as document curation and generation, and so she really helps us a lot with the graphics and the compiling of documents, as well as providing input on those other subject areas. Allison Evans has previously worked with the Urban Design Center at Raleigh, has a background in bicycle and pedestrian planning, as well as just general urban planning and urban space kind of design guideline type planning. And then on the bottom right is a landscape architect who is part-time with our group, but also part-time with the landscape architecture group, Stephen Faber, and he helps us whenever it comes down to looking at site plans, preliminary site plan development, and small area planning, as well as graphics and rendering. And one person who's not up there that I should have, it was an oversight of mine, is Jake Petrosky. He and I go way back, and he's been doing land use planning for a long time across the state. He has a pretty in-depth background in GIS as well, and in fact, he used to work for Esri, which is the company that basically creates one of the major mapping softwares out of their Charlotte office, and now he's in the Raleigh office with us. Next slide, please. So, when Stuart's municipal planning group comes to a town or a county, and we get to work with them on a comprehensive plan update, we kind of view it as a partnership. So it's kind of and the major players, you know, obviously we as a consultant are helping facilitate the plan update process by taking public input and getting to know the community and bouncing our ideas off of the local government staff and the community and the leadership committee, planning board, board of commissioners, et cetera, and making sure that whatever recommendations we think we're hearing are getting tempered by the public's perspective and by the local community's perspective. So a big part of that process is the establishment of a leadership committee. So this would be a group of people that we will work with closely during the plan development process. They're kind of the working group, but I know that name's been taken already in Manio. So they'll be working closely with us to review and vet documents and chapters and make sure that they're properly framed and enjoy the benefit of local perspective and understanding before they're released for a more broad review. And they'll be involved with us throughout the whole project. So their role is to meet regularly with us as the consultant, review plan documents, contribute their perspective and ideas and opinions, help shape and kind of hammer recommendations into the right spot, and also to, you know, get involved and be an ambassador for the plan. Planning doesn't necessarily stop when we leave town and then start back up when we get back. It's an ongoing community conversation, and we hope that our leadership committee is out there talking to people about what they think about the future and what it should be, and then bringing those ideas back to us to make sure that we are on point and pointing in the right direction as the community is pointing. Next is a slide showing the project schedule. This is really the big kickoff. Previous to this, we've only really discussed things like contract scheduling, et cetera. But you'll see on there multiple touch points with the public. Those are those green hexagons, I guess. Green hexagons, multiple touch points with the general public, kind of in a forum like we have this evening. Those triangles represent touch points with the leadership committee. In between all those dots, we'll be having regular communication and coordination calls with town staff. And then you'll see an S in there for a big public survey that we hope to roll out at the end of this month, and I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. So while we have scheduled a sufficient number of public engagement points and make sure that we're touching back regularly with the community, we also do have a deadline to make sure that we have something in place before July 1st. And that is because the state recently passed legislation a year or two ago called Chapter 160D, which was a comprehensive update to the state's planning and zoning enabling legislation. And that mandated that any community that wants to enforce zoning, which we have zoning here, needed to have a reasonably updated, reasonably current land use plan. And so that's one of the reasons that we want to make sure that we are meeting that deadline and make sure that the town has everything in place that it needs to continue enacting zoning according to an updated land use plan. Current land use plan is probably a little more than a decade old, and so we want to make sure things have changed in the last 10, 15 years. We want to make sure we touch back with the community, with staff, with leadership, and make sure that we have a plan that's current and implements the community's vision for its future. Next slide, please. So for those of you that don't do comprehensive plan updates for a living, let me just describe kind of generally what that entails. So a comprehensive plan hopefully helps people come together and talk about issues in their community, what their concerns are, and what they'd like to see differently, things that have worked, things that maybe could have been done better. It helps leadership and elected officials prioritize items for implementation, like when they want to accomplish things, they know that the community has this on their mind and they'd like to see something happen, and then they can designate resources towards achieving those goals. The future land use map component will help guide rezoning and land use development decisions as one of the data points that the planning board and the commissioners consider in their deliberations. I already mentioned the requirement from Chapter 160D, but ultimately it's a community conversation about shared goals and vision and where we want to move our community towards. And the reality is that we get a lot further and get a lot more done if we know where we're headed and we're all going in the same direction. And that's really what we hope to get out of this. You'll be, I'm sure you'll all be interested to hear the perspectives of your neighbors and friends, and then hopefully we'll open up a discussion that will lead to a productive land use plan. So in the next slide, you'll see kind of the general components of a land use plan. It looks like one of my slides got a little messed up, but that's all right. Generally speaking, a land use plan is composed of certain elements. We'll talk about land use, the environment, parks and open space, utilities and infrastructure, and where those investments might be, and all those in the name of implementing the community vision. Manio happens to be one of the communities in one of the 20 coastal counties that's regulated by the Coastal Area Management Act. So the Coastal Area Management Act is a statewide act that deals with protecting shared coastal resources. Ultimately, it kind of trickled down from the federal government back in 1975 or so, and it basically is kind of one of the other things that we want to make sure that this comprehensive plan does. So the Coastal Area Management Act kind of regulates salty areas, right, where the salt water touches the land. So coastal wetlands and marshes, nearshore habitat, dunes and beach areas and so forth. So as part of this land use plan update, this comprehensive plan update, we'll also be making sure that we're providing the information that the state needs in order to ensure that the Coastal Area Management Act goals are met, and this plan can then be reviewed and certified by the Coastal Resources Commission as a CAMA plan, which then the local government, the town staff, will use when they're issuing local small-scale CAMA permits and big-scale CAMA permits. So for things like docks, bulkheads, seawalls, boat ramps, et cetera, all those access points and stuff are needed in order to make sure we need a plan, the state needs a plan to bounce those review approvals off of. Next slide, please. So aside from the background information involved in a CAMA plan and the process that we go through to create it, which is very similar to a traditional comprehensive plan update, we'll be touching on these 5 land use management topics which are required to be addressed by the state. That's public access to public trust waters, which are basically navigable waterways. Land use compatibility, making sure that the development we have in the CAMA regulated areas, salt marshes and stuff, is compatible with the environmental quality that we're looking to achieve. And then infrastructure carrying capacity, natural hazards, and then water quality. And so there's a board out in the hallway. We can talk more about this when we're out there if you want to learn more about that particular part of this plan. But ultimately, these will just get rolled into the regular kind of comprehensive plan update process. You don't have to be specifically knowledgeable in any one of these. You just need to bring your concerns, thoughts, ideas, and perspectives, and we'll do the rest. We'll do the work. So the plan development process typically starts out with us reviewing existing plans and documents. We don't start from scratch. We want to make sure that we're building on the efforts that have already been made. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So we start out with review of that material and generate it using existing data to basically build a picture of the conditions in and around the town. Then we get to know the community, and that kind of started today. We came, the Stuart team was here. We met with town staff this morning, basically all the department heads, and then we talked through their challenges and opportunities, recent successes, recent areas where there could be room for improvement. They're helping us to get to know the town and the issues that the town's facing. Then we had a community tour, so we drove around and saw boots on the ground, the places that were the hot spots that needed attention, the places that were successes. We got some great character images. Obviously, this town is like super photogenic, so love having photos of this town. I actually had some from before when I just passed by once, so I'll just add that to my collection. And then tonight is an introduction to the leadership and getting to know the community. And then right after this, we want to make sure that we touch base with anyone who's here and wants to share their perspective out in the hallway. And we've got some things that we can kind of help focus discussion to help us get to know more about what's concerning to you. After that, we'll be looking more broadly at a discussion of community goals, vision, and values. And we want to kind of grab that information. It'll primarily be assembled through an online survey, and I'll talk more about that in a second, but also through the information we hear tonight, we start to build this picture. There are going to be public meetings, plan drafting, public review and comment, so that's kind of the plan rollout, and then where we kind of hammer it a little bit more, and then it'll go to public adoption hearings. And so just like any rezoning, any rezoning, any update to the ordinance amendment, any adoption of any plan that comes before the town, that the town as a local government is expected to review and adopt, it goes to the planning board first in a public hearing for review and recommendation, and then it goes to the Board of Commissioners to review that recommendation, review the document, review the public comments that have been gathered, and then make a decision on whether to adopt or not. And then following that process, it'll go to the state for that CAMA review, as I mentioned before. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to point out that public engagement is very important. It takes many forms. At Stuart, we want to make sure that people in the community are able to be as involved in the comp plan update as they want to be. And that's our goal, is to make sure that people can be heard. So it starts with the steering committee or the leadership committee. They are the kind of interviews we talked about with staff and with people, staff departments and local subject area experts. Public meetings like the one we're having right after this and in the near future. Community survey, which will be distributed throughout and made awareness throughout the community. And then, of course, there is a project website, and I'll show you that address at the end. It's already been started. And as the plan development takes place, information will continue to be added to that website. And so people can check in, they can review what's happened if they missed it, and they can then kind of, phone a planner, call up the town planner, or send an email to make sure that they're keeping in touch, or touch base with one of the leadership committee or one of the planning board members as they kind of help shape the plan. So to talk really briefly about what goes into that survey, we're going to be kind of asking questions about vision, community vision, and values. What's important to the members of the community. We want to kind of hopefully get that into a shape that then provides goals that we can then frame all the plan recommendations toward achieving, right? So ultimately, at the end of this, we want to have a plan document with background information, goals that we want to achieve as a community, and then the steps that we can take to achieve those goals and how we can get to there. And every recommendation, policy recommendation, implementation step that we have in that plan, we want to point back to one of those goals and say, this is why we're doing this thing, because the community said they wanted to achieve this goal. So currently we see that that survey running from September through October probably, and we're going to be working with staff to make sure we update the project schedule on the website and get that information out as fast as possible. There will be also, like I said, a public meeting coming up soon. Tentatively, I think that we have that for October 27th, if I'm not mistaken. October 27th, it's on the next slide. That'll be kind of like what you see out here, but it'll be a little bit further developed, and we'll have some of the same information, but also some new information. But basically, this is just we're here to listen. We're here to learn and listen. That's the first part of this phase of this project, is the consultant team learning and listening and making sure we understand what's important to you all. On the next slide, you'll see kind of an outline of what we have tonight. We'd like you to tell us about your neighborhood. We'd like you to share your vision for Manio and what's important to you. We have a few preliminary maps out there, mostly just so that we can kind of gather around a map and point and talk. And we want to hear what you're concerned about or what you're excited about, and make sure we kind of capture that vision. And so before I pause to make sure that I hear anything that you all have to say in your official capacity, I would like to just close by pointing to the closing slide, which has the project website, as well as our contact point in the town, town planner, Melissa Dickerson, who's going to be our contact point locally for anything comprehensive plan related, and she's going to be, we're going to be working closely with her to make sure everything's on point and collected and information transferred. But thank you very much for your time tonight. It's been wonderful being here, and I'm looking forward to hearing from what you have to say. Thank you.